Some built highways. Others planted wildflowers along the side. Together, they shaped the journey. On a crisp evening in November 1980, the chandeliers of the Corcoran Gallery glimmered above Washington's cultural elite as the capital gathered to celebrate the opening of Amadeus. Inside, a photograph captured a quiet, almost reverent moment. Former First Lady Lady Bird Johnson, seated, luminous in a satin gown, reaching up to grasp the hand of John Brademas, the recently retired congressman and president of NYU. They were not of the same generation. They came to power through different doors. But in that moment, they stood literally and symbolically as equals, architects of the soft power that underpins a strong republic. Claudia Alta Lady Bird Johnson, born in 1912 in the piney woods of East Texas, was the daughter of a stoic storekeeper and a mother who died too young. Shy but scholarly, she earned degrees in history and journalism, rare for a Southern woman in the 1930s. When she married Lyndon B. Johnson in 1934, she entered a whirlwind of ambition. He was loud, crude, brilliant. She was quiet, perceptive, and deliberate. In 1937, when Lyndon was elected to Congress, they moved into the Kennedy Warren Apartments in Washington, D.C. It was there, in the glow of its Art Deco fixtures, that she began the balancing act that would define her life. She made a home, cooked for lawmakers, and learned to absorb her husband's tempests with poise. And those tempests were frequent. LBJ could be abusive in both tone and temperament. In front of staff or guests, he'd bark, "Bird, get me pie," or dismiss her input with withering remarks. He interrupted, belittled, even mocked her intellect. Once, after she quietly corrected him in a meeting, he snapped, "Don't try to teach me, Bird." And yet she stayed, managing the chaos with grace and near invisible strength. When Lyndon joined the Navy during World War II, Lady Bird ran his congressional office, fielding calls, writing letters, directing staff, and keeping his political career alive in his absence. It was unofficial, unpaid, and decades ahead of its time. Later, as First Lady, she became the nation's emotional ballast in the aftermath of JFK's assassination. But she didn't just comfort, she created. After a walking tour of D.C.'s poorest neighborhoods with Eleanor Roosevelt, she launched the Beautification Campaign, transforming roadsides, parks, and city blocks not with flowers alone, but with the idea that beauty is a form of justice. It was one of the first modern environmental efforts and one of the most quietly radical acts of her time. Lady Bird used elegance as activism. In a White House often defined by force, she was the counterweight, subtle, unshakable, and far more powerful than she let on. John Brademas was born 15 years after Lady Bird in 1927 to a Greek immigrant father and a schoolteacher mother in South Bend, Indiana. He grew up in a home of books, debate, and modest means. A Rhodes Scholar, he came to Congress in 1959, not with a populist roar, but with a professor's pen. Where Lady Bird smoothed the edges of raw power, Brademas shaped its moral architecture. He helped author and pass some of the most significant education and arts legislation in American history. Funding for libraries, museums, the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities, and the expansion of Head Start and Title I. His temperament was disciplined, quiet, exacting. He once said, "You don't need to shout when your purpose is clear." His private life remained largely private. He did marry, though briefly. His greatest passion was civic life, and after leaving Congress in 1981, he became president of New York University, where he raised over $1 billion, recruited top faculty, and elevated NYU from a regional school to a global academic force. Brademus was never flashy. He built quietly, methodically, and with a fierce belief that culture was central to democracy. Their ages, backgrounds, and platforms were different. But Lady Bird and Brademus shared a singular belief that government was not only a mechanism of control, it was a canvas for civic imagination. Lady Bird beautified highways. Brademus built institutions. She brought dignity to the presidency. He brought ideas to Congress. She softened power with presence. He sharpened it with intellect. They were not warriors in the same battle, but allies in the same vision. When they met at the Corcoran that night in 1980, it wasn't just two public figures exchanging pleasantries. It was a handoff between generations, a recognition that leadership comes in many forms: hospitality and legislation, gardens and grants, resilience and resolve. In a city that often rewards noise, they both stood for something quieter and more lasting. Lady Bird would live until 2007, long enough to see her beautification efforts evolve into conservation policy and her LBJ library become a cornerstone of historical study. Her daughters, Lucy and Linda, and their children have carried forward the Johnson name with philanthropic and civic engagement. Brademas passed in 2016 without descendants, but left behind a cultural legacy etched in stone, syllabi, and stages. The John Brademas Center at NYU continues to shape public policy and cultural discourse for future generations. And so, in this single image at the Corcoran, one reaching up, one leaning down, we see two lives that shaped the unseen architecture of a better country. Not through headlines, not through ego, but through belief in what beauty can do, in what education can inspire, in what grace can accomplish. Mozart played on the stage that night, but in the gallery, two Americans conducted their own quiet symphony, and Washington, if it paused to listen, heard something rare, a harmony of purpose decades in the making.